This is now my fourth time on this stage today. So for those of you that know me, hello again. For those of you that don't, I'm Michael Cohn, one of the founders and managing partners of GSV and GSV Ventures. Welcome to our afternoon lunch session. And for those of you that are watching around the world on the live stream, hello. Hopefully everyone is full and is excited and is ready to learn. We have an extraordinary group of panelists here that I'm just honored to share this stage with. And as I was coming up the escalator, I saw a tweet. I'm not going to say who it was from. But the comment was,
this looks serious.
The comment was that change is slow, then it all happens at once, which I thought was just such a wonderful kind of jumping off point for those of us that have been in and around education technology, workforce technology for a long time. Maybe to start, I would just love to know, when you hear that phrase, change is slow, then it all happens at once. And for those of you that are here for your first time or your 15th time, it certainly feels that way. So maybe, Lila, starting with you, love to get your reaction.
Oh, man. Yes, that feels very accurate, doesn't it? And I think the title of this panel is that's a very appropriate quote. I joined Deepmind 6 years ago, and no one understood why I was taking a role at an AI company. I didn't actually have that as my background. I was at Coursera and venture capital and corporate prior to that. And it was really nice, actually, going into an AI research organization, being able to take a long-term view of things. I was suspected someday the AI revolution would come. I don't think I expected quite what has happened in the past 18 months or so. And, I think fortunately a lot of groundwork was put in place, a strong foundation, but also trying to navigate that amidst a changing world, a changing workforce. I think it's a lot all at once.
Bijal, what do you think when you hear that?
It deeply resonates with me. I have a background in data science, and that's what I came out of school doing. I could always tell that there was power behind it, but definitely not the driving motion to drive adoption, I think, in the way that has happened in the last 18 months. I now think about what does it mean for the future of our workforce, and something we knew was going to happen, which was augmentation of people's job responsibilities and automation of their job responsibilities. We knew that was coming, but I think everyone thought it was going to come over time. And so that quote is deeply resonant with me because it's happening right now, and we need to figure out how to get ahead of it as a country and as a society.
Yeah, I think about the history of AI. We've been following it for a while. We've been investing in it for many years. And then in the last 18 months, we see the level of excitement, both internally and externally, for these features and these products is through the roof. And being able to manage an organization that wasn't originally built as an AI organization, but we are now investing heavily and have been, and taking a small team and growing it and getting a diverse perspectives of people who are immensely excited about it and then immensely worried about it, aligned to move towards something that is going to produce impact.
Yeah, that's great. And so when I was asked to moderate this panel, I was excited because each and every one of you have a different relationship with GSV, and you're all part of the GSV family. Lila's been involved with GSV for probably 10 years, plus minus. Bij, probably 5 years, and then Gregor, going back to when we met Andrew, your co-founder, Andrew Grauer. I think it was either in his dorm room or in his first apartment in San Francisco. And we've had the luxury of watching each of you chart your journeys, impact organizations, impact lives. And when I look down at this title, I see founders and CEOs leading the AI revolution. And I assume for most of you that are in the room today, what got you here was AI. But what I would love to do, and hopefully you all are okay with it, is let's actually focus on the other word, which is leadership, right, and leading. And as we kind of think about where the world is today, Ben Sass was on stage about an hour ago, and he talked about this kind of paradox that I think we are all grappling with. Certainly we had 15,000 people at the AIR Show, which is amazing. Hopefully everyone had a chance to go. But I think a question mark is, particularly with AI, is will this be utopia or dystopia? Will it be heaven or hell? And I think that we are all kind of working our way kind of through those issues, but the most important quality and characteristic of organizations to help navigate through periods of massive change is leadership. So if it's okay with each of you, and hopefully the audience, we'll certainly talk about AI and LLMs and any other kind of acronym you want. We'll get the bias and representation, which you probably haven't heard nothing about in San Diego for the past couple of days. But let's talk about leadership and just maybe, Bijal. So for those of you that don't know, so Bijal, and congratulations, just stepped in and went from being the interim to now the full-time CEO of Guild, which is, yes, give it up. So as you think about what it means to be a leader in the organization, and an organization that, for those of you, Guild is one of the most important workforce technology, workforce transformation platforms in the country that is impacting the lives of millions of its members around the country, and hopefully one day around the world. As you think about leadership, as you think about the fact that Guild, as an organization that we were talking about backstage, you're thinking through how to kind of drive systemic change with AI. Your partners, Walmart, Target, the Team USA, everyone is trying to figure out and navigate how they can impact and how they can integrate AI into their own offerings, into their own workforces. Guild in particular is serving the workforce, I think about 70% or so, kind of frontline, that both has the highest opportunity to leverage the benefit of AI, but is also the most at risk. So as you think about what it means to be a leader and navigating those somewhat parallel, but also somewhat competing priorities, what do you think it means to be a leader in this day and age?
Yeah, I think there's probably two answers. One is the leader of Guild, and the second is the leader in a market trying to help organizations figure out how to think about workforce transformation. We spend a lot of time with many of our customers who are actually trying to figure out what's the impact going to be for their organizations on what augmentation or automation is going to do to their workforce. And so what we've started to do is work with companies and take specific roles, and rather than looking at skills, which I know a lot of people spend time talking about here, we've started to look at tasks. One of the really brilliant things about LLMs is you no longer have to tag everything. You can actually take a line. So in a job description, you can take the line, which is the task that someone has to complete, and better understand how likely it is for that task to get automated. And so what we've been doing is working with our employer partners to help them understand inside of a job description or inside of a specific role what is likely to get automated, or what is likely to get augmented in terms of their role, and use that information to then help them figure out, great, knowing that information, how much capacity will be freed up for that employee, and what else can we skill them in or better skill them in order for them to be able to actually be productive as the future of work gets transformed inside their organization. So that's one way I think about Guild leading the conversation around what's going to happen inside of Guild in particular. I also am worried about this exact topic, which is what is going on inside my organization? How do I think about the impacts of AI inside of Guild? What roles are going to get impacted by AI? And how do we think about augmentation of people's responsibilities or their capabilities so that they have the ability to continue to be productive inside the organization or to become supercharged in really interesting ways given the role that they have? And so we're thinking about both those things, both internally and externally.
Yeah, and Gregor, so when you hear the word augmentation, right, and certainly, so for those of you that don't know, and Gregor, I'll let you kind of tell the narrative around how Course Hero then became Learneo, and certainly probably one of the most well-trafficked sites in the U.S. even before AI, and then now with the acquisition of Quillbot, which is 2.5 years old. It was for those of you that don't know, Quillbot was a Chicago-based company. We had the privilege to invest in them. We were on their board and actually just you love it when two of your kids come together and kind of join as one, which is wonderful. It's certainly, I think, been a pretty radical transformation for Learneo in terms of its scale, in terms of its reach. It was certainly prescient in terms of a timely acquisition, that this was even before we were even talking about, GPT-1, GPT-2. And if I'm not mistaken, outside of OpenAI and character AI, Quillbot is now, I think, the third most kind of highly trafficked site in the world as it relates to Gen AI. So as you think about augmentation from a technology standpoint and from a technology leadership standpoint, how is that impacting how you're kind of architecting the product and thinking about the customer journey?
Yeah, Quillbot in particular, started with a series of tools, that were focused at a task level, and we've been evolving that, combining it with the advances in AI to become a co-writer. And so I think the idea that most of the places where we're deploying the technology shouldn't be complete automation, it should be assistance, is where we are, and we're thinking about how can we provide that assistance to workers, to learners, and it can be incredibly powerful to put that in front of people. I think one of the problems, that it goes across, companies and learners, is that a lot of questions that are important don't get asked. Because people are embarrassed, because people don't want to follow up on it. I think one of the things about putting these assistants in place helps people be more productive, because those questions get asked and hopefully get answered, and they'll get answered better and better over time as the technology improves.
Yeah. And then, so speaking of asking questions, so Lila, I'm going to come to you, because for those of you that haven't kind of followed Lila's journey, it's amazing. She is quite sage. And it actually matches your jacket. Right. Your arc and your career has been just extraordinary. Intel and Kleiner Perkins and Coursera, and now coming up on 6 years at Deepmind, Google. And speaking of kind of asking questions that Gregor just said, I read a quote that you once gave, and hopefully I'm paraphrasing it right, that you talked about being the daughter of immigrants to the US, and you always felt like the oddball growing up in kind of Purdue. And the quote is, what that has meant throughout your career is that there's been doors open to you that others might not embrace because you see things from a slightly different perspective. So when I repeat that to you, and I see you smiling, right? What kind of memories is that kind of bringing back, and kind of whether that was your instinct to kind of leave Coursera right when it was going through this radical period of growth and transformation, and then joining Deepmind from a kind of leadership standpoint. When we talk about asking the hard questions, seeing things differently, what does that mean to you?
Sage is an interesting word, because I think it means I figured some of this stuff out after a really long time. Benefits of age, I suppose. It's interesting, because I think throughout my career, I've found myself at places where no one else would want to lean into. Even early in my career at Intel, I worked on DVD technology, which at the time, I remember my boss sat me down and was like, why would anybody watch a movie on a computer, and let alone have a computer in a living room? And now my children don't even know what DVD is. So I think it's, what's been interesting for me is my risk tolerance has been quite different, because I was able to just kind of own my imposter syndrome for most of my career, and just say, okay, well, I don't know everything. This sounds interesting. No one's ever done this before. So what is good is, what is good enough to do this role, and to just leap into some belief that I might have, and then quickly go, okay, I don't know much about this, so who are my personal board of advisors? What can I uniquely bring into this? What do I think my gaps are? How do I surround myself with people who can help me navigate it? And when I hear that quote, and I think about my journey, I remember when I interviewed, the story with Deepmind is I spent 50 hours interviewing. And it was because I was like, oh, this technology is pretty cool, and this could be really transformational, and oh my gosh, what about all these risks? And can I put my kids to bed at night knowing what mommy worked on? And I'm not an AI expert. So why would this job work? But kind of taking the lessons I had from my past experiences of going in and asking the questions, finding the right people, putting them in a room. We were talking earlier, and I told the story of we were having one of our first responsibility governance meetings, but nobody knew that that's what the meeting was, because I called it the meeting to be named later. Because I didn't want the meeting to have some type of people to come in thinking they needed to show up a certain way or be prepared. I just wanted to build the muscle of how do we have constructive conversations, how do we deliberate, and we had a series of these over a couple months before my boss, the CEO, said, you know, that's cute, Lila. I think it's time to formalize this. But it was really a lesson in sometimes being just different and coming at things from a different way. You can make things happen that otherwise might get stuck. I think it relates to the question of how do you create that safe space for people to ask questions? And if you know they're not being asked, how do you ask them? But ask them in a way that's curious. And I think that curiosity of being different has really made a change throughout my 30-plus year career.
And let's talk about risk, and not risk. And if you want to, we can, with bias and misrepresentation and how we're building models. But maybe that's interesting, maybe not. Like, I'll let you. But let's talk about risk and risk tolerance as leaders, and as you think about striking that balance of ethical considerations with business objectives and core design principles. How are each of you kind of thinking about the risk in terms of architecting products, reorganizing the actual kind of team and culture around AI? Bijal, maybe start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty bullish on, I think someone asked a question. I was in another room and someone was like, are we in a hype cycle? I don't think we're in a hype cycle. I think we're at the beginning of an ending of something that is coming, and it's coming relatively quickly. And so I'm quite bullish on it. And so what I think about what are the ways inside of our organization we can move quickly to help people show the proof points of what is possible, as well as the risks and how to mitigate those risks. And so specifically inside a guild, we think about a three-pronged approach. One is, how do we take teams today that could naturally use things like a co-pilot and adopt them inside the organization and just run hard at figuring out what to do there? We have a second approach, which is how do we take a team of individuals who can think about how to integrate AI into the products and services we already have today to make those products and services even better than where they have been or where they were intended to go. And then the last is, how do we take an innovation team and split them off and let them run hard at new products and services that we know will be super valuable to, in our case, our employer partners or our learning partners, to help them move faster and help meet the future of work transformation that's about to happen. But because I don't think it's a hype cycle, and I do believe that this is where the future is moving towards, I have an approach, I think, that is more aggressive than other organizations might take as they think about what to do with this. We also are smaller than many other organizations, and so when you think about the risk-reward trade-off, there's a lot of reward on the other side with figuring out how to integrate this in a way that allows us to propel our mission and where we're trying to go.
Yeah, Gregor, love your reaction to that.
Yeah, I think when we're thinking about, I agree with the technology being fundamentally.
And let me jump in. So for those that don't know, Learneo and Course Hero was one of the most well-capitalized businesses in education technology. Right? It was a unicorn before there were unicorns, which has afforded you and Andrew and the team the ability to be much more kind of medium and long-term focused, as opposed to chasing hype. So just before you kind of go, I think it's important to understand that the company has always taken a longer-term view. So how is that capacity to have long-term planning, as opposed to chasing hype or chasing vanity metrics for your next round of financing? How is that kind of given you all the latitude to kind of sustainably build?
Yeah, I think that that has been fundamentally how we've tried to build a business sustainably, build for the long term, build for what we know is not going to change. And yeah, this has challenged that in some ways. We are excited about the opportunities that AI unlocks, but we want to do it in a way that's going to be responsible and focused on the long term. I think ways that we can strike that balance is making sure that we have stakeholders involved in the process early. We talk with both students and educators regularly about what we're building, what we're thinking about building, and then we have a diverse workforce that we explicitly state that we want to be on top of any sort of problem cases and make sure that people who are looking for those things have a voice and are being encouraged to speak up. And then we have to be proactive about responding to those. And then when we have solutions that we want to get out to users, we can do that in a staged way, and we can do that in a way that we're still getting lots of rich feedback from people who are actually using it and what they're seeing it, because they're going to see something differently than we do. So, but we do want to be unlocking that potential.
Yep, makes sense. And then, so speaking of stakeholders, both in terms of kind of customers and kind of folks within the ecosystem, but also stakeholders just in terms of partners, and whether it's tech partners or customer partners, how are you all kind of each thinking through the role of partnerships and having the right folks around the table in terms of design, in terms of building sustainability, but also just in terms of, quite frankly, building value, right? And if I'm not mistaken, Gregor, most of Learneo's tech is either homegrown or you guys have been incredible acquirers. Bijal, I think, Guild is kind of, at that kind of intersection of both building in-house, but also leveraging great partners. And obviously kind of what's happening at Deepmind and Google and AlphaFold. And as we kind of think about Gemini, certainly kind of that kind of platform play. So love to understand how each of you are kind of thinking through stakeholders. Each of you are kind of thinking through kind of where you kind of wall off certain kind of tech, but also making sure that you've got the right kind of stakeholders around the table. And kind of how that's from a kind of leadership standpoint, how that's impacting your overall kind of strategy around AI. Lila, thoughts? I see you nodding.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the fact throughout my career, one of the common threads has been how do we make sure that technology doesn't happen to people, but rather with people and with communities. I'm here, as it says, as a CEO of Google DeepMind, but I also have an education nonprofit that I co-founded 10 years ago, and it's all about like an impact accelerator for education nonprofits, and we partner with them on kind of the last mile of building the tech capacity over a 3 to 5 year period, and we work with over 700 nonprofits in 90 countries. So this is like very much of just how I work and how I think. When I came into Deepmind, thinking about how to now, okay, it's an AI research lab. We have some of the world's brightest AI researchers, interdisciplinary approach. They would have never met in university, so the fact they're all together in a company was pretty revolutionary at that time, in 2010 when Deepmind was founded. But really, we were missing so many voices around the table, so how do you bring them in? And you've mentioned AlphaFold was our 3D protein prediction, which has completely transformed the way that life sciences, and it's being used now basically we saved about 1 billion human hours of research and made it publicly available to advanced fields of like climate science, life sciences, disease understanding, et cetera. And the question is, should we have released it or not? Well, we didn't think we had all the right voices. We were the AI experts, machine learning experts, so we brought in over 3 dozen Nobel laureates, professors, academics, government officials, and talked about it and said, what's the right way to be responsible in how we deploy this? So we have that experience very early from our history. We've been doing this in the education space as well, of convening groups and listening, because our thought is if we can get this into the earliest stages of research, much like what Gregor just mentioned, if we can kind of come in with the attitude of how do we build AI responsibly to benefit humanity, we're just a small organization. No one organization, no one country can do this on our own. So how do we take a very connection, knowledge sharing from the very beginning, and in the process, enable that AI expertise for others in the community?
Yeah. Bijal, what does collaboration mean to you? And how is Guild, given who your partners are, given who your members are, how is Guild working and collaborating with your partners in terms of just finding the right ways to integrate AI?
Yeah, I mean, one of our core values is shared success. So we think a lot about partnerships and collaboration, and making sure that, again, to what Lila said, we have the right folks around the table. So we both have a customer advisory board as well as a member advisory board, and we use both of those to help us figure out, in the case of the member advisory board, in talking with our members, and Guild's primary focus has been for a long time on frontline workers. That's where our bread and butter is. That's where we spend our time. So whether we're talking about frontline healthcare workers or frontline retail workers, we are focused on that. And one of the things we learned from our member advisory board is there is an understanding that there is something called GPT, but there is a real aversion and a little bit of fear around it, and no practical way or approach to think about how to actually utilize it in your work. And so we created something called AI skilling bundles. We didn't create them ourselves. We worked with our partners and collaborated with a bunch of learning institutions around the country to say, what are approachable ways to help people understand how to integrate things like ChatGPT into their daily work, and to help make them smarter or better and augment the work that they're doing. So we do take a very partnerships first approach. We're also very clear about what our core differentiators are and what's bread and butter to Guild, and ensure that we're investing our time and energy in doing those things well, and letting the other partners around the table invest in their core differentiators and to do those things well. Yeah.
Thoughts, reaction? I see you.
Yeah, as far as partners, since Learneo has multiple business lines kind of inside of it, we have kind of a partnership within the company that's a little bit different than most, where we fundamentally believe that these businesses know their area and their products best, and so we're not trying to, just push them together into one brand, into one product. But we want to understand where there's opportunities for collaboration between the business lines and how we can unlock something that's special because they're in the same business fundamentally. And so we do, these deep partnerships without, separating while still having separate organizations and people who really understand those businesses to run them. It's a fun sort of mix of trying to find that synergy without, trying to have all the problems that come with traditional merger and acquisition.
Yep. And let's talk about problems, right? Not everything is rosy, and the beauty of sharing a stage with builders is twofold. One, builders do hard things, and you guys are all just doing extraordinary work. But we also know that when we build things, shit breaks, right? So let's talk about some of those harder times, challenges, kind of lessons learned. And as you kind of reflect upon the past number of years, either within the organization or Lila, I know that you have your own nonprofit that you also advise a bunch of founders as well. As you think about some of the challenges, pitfalls, I wish I would have known. What are those?
There's so many. I think how many founders do we have in the room? Sorry, I can't see the. Okay.
Quite a bunch.
Yeah, great. I think when you're founding, one of the great things about founders is they can imagine possibilities that others can't imagine. And I think sometimes all that optimism, you sometimes forget how. Fortunately, I have a great co-founder, so I'm not saying this, but from my time in venture capital, of seeing how hard it is to co-found. So there's the startup stage and then the growth stage, and can you align on the values perspective that you want to have, not only in getting up and proving yourself, but then scaling the organization. When I look back at my career, getting a team aligned around goals, giving them the space to explore and succeed is often the hardest part of the technology is complicated, but the people, humans are messy, and but also really exciting when you can find the right people, get them into the right roles, and create the environment for them to succeed. One of the best career advice that I ever got was, if you're taking risks, you're bound to take a lot of heat for it. And I think for me, one of the biggest things has been finding, as I said, like who around you is going to help you navigate all of that. And when I was at Intel as chief of staff to the CEO and chairman, he was bold and just wanted and passionate about education. And I was taking a lot of heat for a lot of different programs that we were trying to get off the ground. And he pulled me aside one day, and this must have been, 2005, and it's like critical to my leadership philosophy. He said, Lila, listen, pathfinders end up with arrows in their back all the time. And he said, you're going to have more arrows in your back than anything. He said, just promise me this. Stop occasionally so I can pull them out, and then you can run further, faster. And I think that's like one of the core things about leadership. How do you find the right people, right, make sure they're kind of staying within the general bounds, and help them run as far and fast and let them fail. And my job as a leader is to take the heat and take the responsibility. And I'm not doing my job if I haven't steered them and like, okay, you're getting a little close there, like let's refocus a bit, or like, are we pulling in the right folks? But I feel like that is absolutely critical. And the pace of innovation, going back to your first quote, is very fast right now. Like, the change is continuing to come. We're not going backwards on AI, it's moving forwards. We have to be operating in a very dynamic and different situation. We need to be able to have those feedback loops and to take calculated risks where it makes sense.
Makes sense. So Bijal, what are some arrows that we can collectively pull from your back?
A lot of arrows, just kidding. I think that I think there are probably two things, and I'm not a founder, I'm a scaler. And when you think about growing an organization quite rapidly, there are mistakes you make along the way. One of those, I think that's really important to keep in mind, especially for those of you who go through the scaling phase, is focus. I think it's really easy, even in coming to a conference like this, to see many amazing, amazing things happening. And you could run away from this conference and be like, we have to be doing, and then make a Rolodex of things that you have to be doing. And I think this goes back to something I said earlier, really knowing a few things. One, what's your mission and what are you trying to do as a business? Two, understanding what your core differentiators are and what you really need to be known for or what you want to be known for. And three, understanding what the growth drivers are in your business and how you invest in those growth drivers in the right way. And I do think in particular with things like AI, those growth drivers are changing for businesses quite rapidly. And so being able to understand how that fits into and will either accelerate your business or where someone else can come in and leapfrog your business is a really important thing to keep in mind, so you can understand how to stay at pace with what is happening and so that you can move as quickly as needed, just given the amount of rapid change that is happening and will continue to happen.
Yeah, I think two things that I think about for challenges. One is, setting, especially related to AI, is setting the right expectation. And there's a problem with that with, people are using your product, but also internally. There's so much excitement about what could be, and there's a lot of amazing things about what is, but there are also challenges and places where there are holes today. So getting an organization aligned about where we want to be, where we are, and how we're going to bridge that gap is an interesting problem. And I think one thing that we've done when we've done this well is lean into champions who understand where we want to be and understand what is exciting about that, and let them tell the story a little bit more. I think the other one is when we think internally about an organization and how an organization might change in the face of AI and how jobs might change in the face of AI is, bringing our organizations to the forefront, but doing that responsibly. How do we educate people about how AI can help them do their job better and how that's going to be better for the organization overall and better for them? And telling that story has been a unique challenge in today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Really all super insightful, and hopefully, those of you in the audience that are building kind of, that hits home. You guys all taken a bunch of arrows, but you've also driven incredible change, and you guys should be applauded for that. So thank you for that. So we've got about 5 minutes left. If it's okay, maybe we'll just do some lightning lane. I just took my kids to Disney. I still have lightning lane fast pass on my mind. Sorry. Lightning questions. First one, AGI. How close are we to that? And are there other unintended consequences that we aren't talking about?
Looking at me. I think even within our own organization, we don't all align on the timeline. Mm-hmm. So, and for those who aren't aware, AGI as artificial general intelligence, I do think we're seeing that AI is becoming more general and more capable. Maybe some of the things that we can do this year we couldn't have imagined last year. What that means is we need to be responsible stewards, not only of what we're developing, the organizations we're building, because that gets reflected in the models themselves or the applications, but also how do we collaborate not only at a country, like a community level, but also globally. And I think this is one of, there's been a lot of work around in the UK, where I'm based. We had a safety summit last year, the White House commitments that came out last year as well. I think there's continuation of conversations in Asia and globally, and I think this is going to be increasingly critical, starting to communicate and collaborate, and then we need to align. Unlike the internet build-out or the computing build-out where, sorry, I'm very lightning on this, but hardware was easy to deliver, hard to deliver. Putting an internet pipeline into a continent, this is just moving fast. Yep. Deployment is fast.
Yep. AGI, unintended consequences we aren't talking about. Thoughts?
She's the expert.
Yep. Okay. All right.
That was lightning.
That was lightning. That was like a thunderstorm. All right. Most exciting breakthrough in your company. Most exciting breakthrough in someone else's company. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
It's your turn.
Yeah. Go ahead.
It's my turn.
Yeah. No,
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think when we got some of the I really believe in the power of an AI tutor in education. Mm-hmm. That one-on-one learning has a lot of fundamental benefit that's been shown in research. And when we were starting to unlock some of those things, I think, and seeing students react to it and teachers react to it and react positively, I mean, that was amazing, and we're continuing to do that. And I don't know which one to point to, so mm-hmm. but in that area, and then. Looking externally, I think as AI gets better at processing data, mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of things that get unlocked. I'm really excited about the ability for insights to be driven on large-scale data by AI. I think, yeah, I guess in the lightning version I'll stop, but yeah. Yeah.
I'll give a non-education example that I think was really cool. I recently was listening to a recording between a patient and an augmented reality coach, and it was a voice phone call conversation that was happening between both parties. And they were like, if you're listening super closely, you could figure out like, oh, this is being generated by AI on the other side. But it was really interesting to watch the conversation happen. And I think we always talk about AI doesn't have the ability to be empathetic. But if you listen to this phone call, the amount of empathy that artificial intelligence had in terms of dealing with the conversation. It was a cancer patient on the other side, and listening to the conversation, because we're feeding so much data into these systems, and the data is that is going in is both being augmented by visuals, video, voice. It's not just text. I think it's incredible, some of the opportunities that are available to us that I think we're just scratching the surface on. And not knowing whether you're talking to a human or not talking to a human is also very scary. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. All right, Lila, take us home. This is your first summit in 7 years, right? So I hope you come back before another 7 years. But I also hope that I get to share the stage with you in 7 years from now. What are we talking about? I told her it was going to be softballs. This is like a heater.
You know, I think I actually hope and expect that we're talking about how AI is, if we're talking about AI, we're talking about it in terms of how are we using AI in a way that clarifies the humanity that we bring to everything we do, including education and learning. I just, another quote that the same boss said, and I just posted this, is computers or technology isn't magic, teachers are. And I really expect that years from now, maybe we are talking about personalized learning and we have it really working. And it's not just in schools, but it's lifelong. And it's helping us be the best version of ourselves.
Great parting thoughts. Lila, Bijal, Gregor, thank you. How about a round of applause for our wonderful panelists?